Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session on epigenetics. My name's Julia Lessing and I'm the chair for this session. Our two presenters today are actuaries who are both very passionate about raising awareness and starting a conversation about epigenetics. Poonam is a health actuary who's committed to using her knowledge to make a difference in the healthcare industry. She sees the emerging area of epigenetics as an opportunity for many stakeholders, and she wants to start the conversation now so that we can consider some of those implications so that when we can use epigenetic testing, we're ready. Christelle, oh no, that's me. Christelle, who's on Zoom, is a life actuary who's passionate about innovation across the life industry. She believes that epigenetics can benefit both insurers and policyholders, and she aims to raise broader awareness so that people understand what is epigenetics and how can we use epigenetics testing. Now, I have a confession to make, a little secret. I used to be a smoker. In first year uni, in between lectures, I'd be out there having my ciggies, until I learned that smokers have twice the mortality than non-smokers, and so I quit. Now today, I would describe myself as a non-smoker, but I wonder if my epigenetics would give away my secret. And I wonder what epigenetics would say about you and your secrets. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Poonam and Christelle via Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. I'd like to start with a disclaimer, two actually. The first is I've got a very heavy South African accent, so please bear with me. And the second, more importantly, is that epigenetics is an emerging science and the use of epigenetic tests is an emerging technology. While Christelle and I have no clinical expertise whatsoever, we've relied on the input of two medical doctors, Dr. Gary Cantor and Dr. Liesel van Deventer, who've helped shape this presentation. Over to Christelle.
Thanks, Poonam. The year is 1944. It's the end of the Second World War. The Nazis cut off food supplies to the western part of the Netherlands in retaliation for the exiled Dutch government supporting the Allies. Some 20,000 people died, and about 4.5 million people were affected by the direct and indirect consequences of the famine. In addition to an exceptionally harsh winter, bad crops, and 4 years of brutal war, the population was forced to live on rations of about 400 to 800 calories per day. To put this into perspective, adults need a minimum of 2,000 calories to survive, while toddlers need about 1,000 to 1,400 calories. So 400 to 800 calories was severely limiting. This is referred to as the Dutch hunger winter and has proved unique in unexpected ways. Because it started and ended so abruptly, it has served as an unplanned experiment in human health. Pregnant women, it turns out, were uniquely vulnerable, and the children they gave birth to have been influenced by famine throughout their lives. When they became adults, they ended up a few pounds heavier than average. In middle age, they had higher levels of LDL cholesterol, and they also experienced higher rates of conditions such as obesity, diabetes, and schizophrenia compared to people born directly before or afterwards. This made me wonder, what if they could take a test to determine how their environment or behaviors have impacted their life so far? A test that could tell them what steps they could take to improve their health, reduce or reverse the impact of the in utero malnutrition to an extent, and live a longer, healthier life. Would they actually make use of this information and take the required steps to counteract the negative effects of the famine? In today's presentation, we are going to give you a brief overview of what epigenetics is, how this can be used in the life insurance industry, and what some of the concerns, ethical, legal, and social implications of using epigenetics in the life insurance industry are.
So to understand genetics, epigenetics, we first need to understand genetics. At a high level, when we speak about genetics, we're speaking about our DNA. And this is made up of tiny molecules, A, G, C's, and T's. And it's the specific arrangement of these molecules that's interpreted as our genes or our genome. Epigenetics, on the other hand, refers to a layer of molecules that sits on top of our DNA. In fact, the word epigenetics is derived from the Greek word epi, to mean above or on top of the level of the gene. Epigenetics really refers to the way in which our genes are expressed. Epigenetic changes can either increase, decrease, or even deactivate a gene's expression. So put simply, epigenetics is the way in which our genes are either turned on or turned off. And this occurs without altering our primary DNA sequence at all. To make this a bit more tangible, let's start with a simple example. Let's assume that the letters on the screen represent a sequence in our DNA. When arranged in a specific way, we can interpret them as words. And when given grammar and context, they take on a very clear meaning. However, when given very different grammar, they can take on an entirely new meaning. Similarly, epigenetics can be thought of as the grammar of our genome. So what influences our epigenetics? We know through years of scientific study that it's the diet we eat, whether it's high in sugars and unhealthy fats, the amount of exercise or physical activity we get and the intensity of that exercise, whether we're able to manage our stress well, how much sleep we get and the quality of that sleep, whether we smoke or drink in excess, and even how healthy our mothers were when they were pregnant with us. All of this has an impact on our epigenetics. Aside from lifestyle and behavioral choices, the external environment can also have an impact on your epigenetics. And this is in the form of pollutants or toxins in the air or the water in the environment in which you live. In addition, the commercial environment can also play a role. Just think about how cheap and readily available fast foods are compared to healthy alternatives. So if we think about this philosophically for a moment, epigenetics really represents the way in which our own life experience is written on top of our DNA. There are three main areas of epigenetic study. The main amount of research has happened in the space of DNA methylation, and that will be the focus of this presentation. So DNA methylation really refers to the collection of chemical groups or methyl groups that attach themselves on top of our DNA, particularly the C element of our DNA, which is why this is also called cytosine methylation. Cytosine methylation occurs naturally in the body, and in fact, it accrues with age at certain locations in the DNA, and conversely, there's a loss of methylation with age at other locations in the DNA. So by keeping track of both of these aging patterns, we can come up with very accurate estimators of age and mortality risk. So DNA methylation in relation to mortality risk has been published extensively in terms of tobacco use and biological aging. Some research has happened in terms of alcohol use, but not much has been published relative to tobacco use. If we look at DNA methylation in terms of smoking, we can see here on panel A very distinct differences in methylation patterns for people who have never smoked, former smokers, and current smokers. Panel B shows us very distinct differences in people who have smoked 2 cigarettes a day versus those who have smoked 20 cigarettes a day. And panel C shows us that even after we quit smoking, DNA methylation patterns can persist in our body long after we've quit. And so we can use this information to split the former status into 2 groups, recent quitters and long-term quitters. So what's amazing about this is that if we could use it in the underwriting process, we could get over the hurdle of smoker's amnesia or recall bias at application stage. Similarly to smoking, epigenetic tests can also separate the population into 3 groups in terms of alcohol consumption. and this is heavy drinkers, moderate drinkers, and little to non-drinkers. DNA methylation in terms of mortality has been investigated in terms of biological aging. So everybody has two ages. Your chronological age, which is the age you turn at every birthday, something we have no control over, and your biological age, which is the age of the cells in your body. And this is a bit more flexible and responsive to changes in your lifestyle and health status. The way in which biological age is estimated is through the use of epigenetic clocks. An epigenetic clock is a multivariable age estimator using DNA methylation. So what this gives you is a DNA methylation-based mortality risk score. The example we show here uses DNA methylation at various sites in the body, including DNA methylation based on smoking pack years, and this has been used in conjunction with age and gender to predict time to death. This type of model has shown to have better predictive value than using just traditional factors, risk factors alone. DNA methylation has also been investigated in terms of disease risk, and the example we show here is cancer. So too much methylation, hypermethylation, can result in the activation of cancer genes that would otherwise have been switched off, and too little methylation, hypomethylation, can result in the deactivation of cancer protector genes that would otherwise have been switched on. So again, switching on or switching off cancer protector genes. Similar to cancer, DNA methylation has been investigated in terms of metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, and neurological conditions. Over to Christelle.
So in order to explain the several benefits and opportunities of using epigenetics in life insurance, let's make use of Popeye, a pugnacious, wisecracking cartoon sailor who possesses superhuman strength after ingesting an always handy can of spinach. As an example, after Popeye and Olive Oil got married, he decided to take out life insurance because he wants to take care of her in case anything should ever happen to him. Using epigenetics in life insurance will then have the following steps. At the application stage, the insurer will send Popeye an epigenetic testing kit. Popeye will make use of this testing kit to collect a saliva sample and send this back to the insurer or a lab for testing. Because epigenetic testing is obtained from a non-invasive saliva sample, rather than blood and urine collected by paramedical nurses, this improves Popeye's customer convenience and experience. By making use of the epigenetic test, the application process can also be simplified or shortened significantly. A lot of the information that was previously gathered from the policyholder, like gender, age, etc., can now be identified based on the epigenetic test. So the underwriting questionnaire can be reduced to take this into account. The life insurer will make use of this to determine his biological age, where this refers to how old the cells in your body are. A longevity report can then also be shared with the insured life. Popeye's biological age might differ from his chronological age, since he is a smoker, which will increase his biological age, and this might lead to age acceleration. But since he loves his spinach so much, which means he has a relatively healthy diet, this will reduce his biological age and lead to age deceleration. The life insurer subsequently provides Popeye with a personalized report based on his epigenetic data. Examples of information that might be included in the report includes the following. The first year you take the test, your epigenetic age ratio is 1.29, which means that if you lived 20 more years at this rate, your age would be 51 when you are 44. The second year, your epigenetic age ratio is 1.15, which means that if you lived 20 more years at this rate, your age would be 50 when you are 46. And the third year you take the test, your epigenetic age ratio is 0.94, which means that if you lived 20 more years at this rate, your age would be 48 when you are 50. A comparison of his biological age to his calendar age, which can, for example, look something like this. His delta rate, where this is determined as your chronological age less your biological age, with a positive delta H, implying that your cells are healthier than your chronological age. A graph showing where most people would fall on the graph when comparing their chronological age versus their biological age. And then a graph showing your epigenetic age ratio over time. It can also include suggestions of what you can reduce or improve on to improve your biological age, with examples and explanations on the approach that can be followed under each of the above-mentioned suggestions, with detailed explanations of why each of these can improve our biological age. For example, an organic, whole food diet has been shown to not only maximize the antioxidant potential of our cells, but also eliminate harmful aging toxins entering our bloodstream. Or cumulative evidence points to the role of sleep loss and sleep disturbances as a contributor to early disease onset and shortened survival. What this means for Popeye is that even if he stopped smoking before applying for life insurance, or if he attempted to hide the fact that he smokes from the insurance company, the epigenetic test will still be able to measure his long-term smoking exposure, and this will help the insurer to assess his health risk more accurately. The current underwriting approach is to ask the policyholder at application stage whether he or she is a smoker, and this does not take historic smoking status into account, which is a big advantage of making use of epigenetics during the underwriting process. This will therefore lead to more accurate underwriting. If the life insurance company accepts Popeye's health risk, they can use the information obtained from the epigenetic test to charge a premium that is commensurate with his health risk. Popeye's favorable epigenetic markers in terms of eating healthy might lead to lower premiums, while his higher risk epigenetic markers in terms of smoking might lead to higher premiums. A couple of years have passed, and Popeye completes another epigenetic test. Over the last couple of years, Popeye followed the epigenetic report suggestions to improve his epigenetic health. He stopped smoking, he exercised more, etc. His biological age increased by less than his chronological age, showing that the suggestions have in fact led to a healthier lifestyle. The life insurer assesses his epigenetic profile and uses this information to charge a premium at this point that, again, is commensurate with his health risk, which leads to more accurate pricing. This allows the insurer to manage the policy over the long term and ensures alignment with Popeye's evolving health conditions. Because his epigenetic health improved so much, the life insurer also gives him a partial rebate of the premiums that he paid over the last year. These discounts and rebates incentivize Popeye to adopt an even healthier lifestyle going forward, resulting in better health outcomes and potentially reducing claims burden for the insurer. The above scenario demonstrates that the utilization of epigenetics in the insurance industry offers advantages to both insurers and policyholders. It enables insurers to enhance the accuracy of underwriting, pricing, and managing insurance risk, leading to a reduction in claims burdens and associated costs. Simultaneously, policyholders benefit from improved health outcomes, which in turn can result in lower insurance premiums. Next, we want to take you through some insurance companies that have started making use of epigenetics. So Usurance is a US life insurance company where, like using a price comparison site, consumers can use Usurance to purchase life insurance products from several different providers. However, ahead of choosing a product, they are invited to provide a saliva sample. The sample is then processed and analyzed to produce a longevity report, complete with an assessment of the client's biological age. And the biological age is used to determine the life insurance products made available to you. Foxo Life offers the first life insurance policy with a personalized longevity report. They use the science of epigenetics to deliver a detailed analysis of your biological age and your epigenetic wellness status. They give you an accurate snapshot of your biological age compared to your chronological age. Human Life Expectancy is a US-based consulting firm that helps organizations to predict and extend human life expectancy. And they also have a strong focus on how epigenetics can achieve this. Given that epigenetic tests are commercialized in Australia, with tests mostly imported or shipped from an American company called True Diagnostic, this means that individuals are able to access their epigenetic profiles through non-traditional means, such as through direct-to-consumer epigenetic testing. This means that individuals may learn about their potential epigenetic risks or their higher disease risk or health outcomes without their life insurance company having access to this information through their medical records. From the perspective of actuarial fairness, this information asymmetry may result in anti-selection, in which those at a higher risk to develop some diseases are more likely to seek life insurance and in higher amounts than those at lower risk, without the insurer being able to correctly identify those at high risk. Avoiding anti-selection is the main reason insurance companies may seek access to epigenetic test results generated in clinical settings. And it's the principal reason insurance companies might seek to do their own epigenetic testing in the future. So epigenetic tests and the personalized reports mentioned here can therefore help to reduce information asymmetry by providing insurers with epigenetic data instead of relying solely on policyholder disclosure. For insurers to make use of epigenetic tests to determine policyholders' biological age, they will need to evaluate the epigenetic tests. A widely recognized evaluation framework for evaluating clinical tests can be used for this purpose. The clinical tests can be used, the assessment criteria comprise of the following. The first one that I want to touch on is analytical validity. And the questions to ask are, how accurately can an epigenetic test determine someone's biological age? If I were to take the exact same test twice on the same day, will I get the same answer? And if two different labs test the same sample, will they determine the same biological age? And to go into more detail in analytical validity, I thought it would be nice to show you some of the epigenetic logs that have been used to determine your biological age over time. So first generation clocks, emphasis was on identifying a small set of specific regions of DNA that exhibited strong correlations with chronological age and creating predictive models based on them. The most well-known first generation clocks were the Harvard clock and the Hannum clock, where second generation clocks often incorporate information related to health, diseases, and physiological traits, allowing them to estimate biological age and mortality risk more accurately. And this makes them more informative about an individual's overall well-being, with the most well-known second generation clocks being the Grimm age and Pheno age clocks. So as can be seen here, there has been a lot of developments with regards to epigenetic clocks and biological age determination methods over the last couple of years, with different tests being used for different purposes with varying degrees of accuracy. Because of the different clocks currently available, life insurers will need to investigate which test is most appropriate for underwriting and pricing purposes, or which tests are more accurate or reliable when using biological age for predicting mortality or disease risk. And next, Pina will take us through the next one.
Thanks, Christelle. So the next criteria is clinical validity, and this refers to, does the test results actually have any diagnostic or predictive value? So what we're interested in here is whether your biological age correlates well with your mortality and disease risk. Or of the individuals who have been flagged with epigenetic markers of interest, how many actually develop the disease? This is a very difficult criteria to meet, as it requires large clinical trials to prove the clinical validity of a test. The next criteria is clinical utility. And here we need to provide information on health outcomes or disease risk that will be helpful to the consumer. So as Christelle mentioned, the insurer can provide a longevity report to the policyholder. But we need to make sure, or the insurer needs to make sure, that the results of the epigenetic test are clearly interpreted and that the policyholder is provided with actionable information. So if we have epigenetic tests that meet this framework and we could supply them to the insured population, this would help improve population risk stratification. So in this simple example here, we've stratified the population in 3 groups. At the primary level, we're interested in how to prevent any abnormal DNA methylation from occurring. By abnormal DNA methylation, I'm referring to too much or too little methylation. At the secondary level, we're interested in how to reverse any existing abnormal DNA methylation. And at the tertiary level, these are patients who are too sick for us to reverse their abnormal DNA methylation. And so we're interested in how epigenetic tests can aid in treatment planning. So at the primary level, this is best done through the use of preventative care, wellness, or rewards programs to incentivize healthy behaviors, such as good diet and nutrition. Metal nutrients, or B vitamins, have been shown to play an important role in a healthy methylation process. So deficiencies in these vitamins can indicate a need to modify diet. Instead of taking vitamin supplements, which have shown to have inconclusive results on methylation process, we're better off trying to encourage healthy food purchases through the use of subsidies, for example. Next, physical activity. There's been many studies that show that physical activity, even 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, can have very positive links to your health and your health span, thereby improving your lifespan. So insurers can actually think about rewarding physical activity here. In terms of stress management, DNA methylation has been shown in a recent study to be a mediator for stresses early on in childhood development and psychiatric disorders developed later in life. Just think about the Dutch winter hunger study that we started off with. We know that stress is also a risk for cardiovascular disease, and so if we can provide the insured population with better tools and techniques to manage their stress, this should be able to help them improve their health and health span. Moving on to the secondary level, it turns out that the same interventions that are required to prevent abnormal DNA methylations are the ones that are required to reverse it. And in terms of tertiary level, like I mentioned here, these patients are too sick for us to actually reverse their abnormal DNA methylation, but epigenetic markers have shown good prognostic value in terms of predicting survival. So they enhance your survival prediction over and above existing prognostic measures. If we think about expensive drugs, the way in which these are accessed are either through meeting certain clinical criteria and the use of doctor motivations, which can be quite subjective. And so if we introduce epigenetic tests into this, this can help introduce an extra objective measure, which would help with improving resource allocation decisions. Christelle will take us through the LC part of the presentation next.
So according to the actuarial fairness principle, individuals with similar health risk levels should pay similar premiums. In other words, high-risk individuals should not be conflated with low-risk individuals, and these 2 groups should be treated differently by life insurance underwriters. Specifically, challenge may arise when deciding whether it's prudent or fair to implement epigenetic age and aging estimators in life insurance. The question here that demands attention is whether the testing has been scientifically validated and if there is a proven correlation between the biological age calculations of methylation testing and mortality risk. Without the essential evidence, it can be seen as actuarially unfair to impose epigenetic testing or to require the results of a previous test for insurance purposes. Informed consent would need to be provided prior to insurance policyholders or applicants undergoing an epigenetic test, or for insurance companies to access previous test results. Questions may arise about whether such consent would be sufficiently informed. Epigenetic information is highly personal and can potentially be used against individuals during the underwriting process. Using epigenetic data in insurance might potentially violate the POPI Act. Insurance companies could potentially discriminate against individuals based on their epigenetic profiles, denying coverage or charging higher premiums due to perceived health risks associated with certain epigenetic patterns. The last point we want to touch on is the impact legislation can have on the implementation of epigenetics in insurance. So in Australia, a 2018 parliamentary joint committee called for an industry ban on genetic discrimination. And since 2019, an industry self-regulated partial moratorium has prohibited life insurance companies from using genetic information of people making applications below certain limits, such as 500,000 Australian dollars for death cover and 4,000 Australian dollars a month for income protection. Providers are still legally allowed to request genetic information under the current legislation. What this means, though, is that an exception to anti-discrimination legislation allows insurance companies to use genetic information to deny, cap, or increase the cost of life insurance cover, provided that it exceeds certain caps. In South Africa, ALCISA provides guidelines on genetic testing, which is as follows. So they believe that the results of genetic tests performed prior to the application for insurance should be underwritten no differently to any other information relevant to the risk. The insurer should not request an applicant to undergo a genetic test to support an application for insurance, whether this is in order to obtain a lower than standard premium rate or to indicate the presence or absence of a suspected genetic condition. A request for a genetic test should be a clinical decision based on clinical information and a risk assessment of the patient, with informed consent, pre-test counselling, post-test counselling, and follow-up. This is, however, just guidelines and not legislation. Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, or GINA, applies in the US. For health insurance in the US, it's against regulations to use genetic, not epigenetic information to determine the pricing of health insurance, since it's seen as an absolute necessity that you can't live without. But it's not the case with life insurance, because life insurance is considered discretionary. Genetic data can therefore be used for life insurance, but life insurers are conservative or cognizant when it comes to using genetics in life insurance. So provided that legislation is put in place to protect unfair discrimination based on genetic information, should epigenetics be included in the legislation, or is epigenetics distinct enough from genetics to be excluded from this legislation? The question is it seen as unfair to discriminate based on epigenetic information? Because epigenetics can change over your lifetime based on your behaviors, indicating that you have control over your epigenetics compared to your genetics, since it's not just static genes received from your parents. Does it make it more ethical to make use of epigenetics in life insurance? Or, because epigenetics is still linked to your genetics to some extent, do the same privacy and discrimination concerns apply to epigenetics? In addition to the LC we mentioned here, there are also some additional constraints that life insurers need to consider. So implementing epigenetics in insurance requires significant investment in research, infrastructure, and expertise. Insurance companies would need to develop new risk assessment models and adapt their underwriting processes. Epigenetic profiling typically requires obtaining saliva samples from policyholders, sample processing, and laboratory analysis, which can be expensive and time-consuming. Since epigenetic markers can change, routine testing needs to be done, and as such, data collection and analysis needs to be done on an ongoing basis. The cost of obtaining epigenetic data for many policyholders or applicants could be significant, especially considering the scale of the insurance industry. Most of the commercially available epigenetic tests are carried out in the US and the UK. The tests that are available in Australia make use of an American company called True Diagnostic that carries out epigenetic tests. Different laboratories allow you to carry out the tests in Australia, with the prices ranging depending on the option chosen. With OptiLabs, for example, the analysis is done in the US, with the test being shipped to and from Australia with a cost of just under 800 Australian dollars. This includes a detailed epigenetic report provided to the consumer. Fairfield Nutrition does it similarly to OptiLabs, but includes an hour consultation to review the results, and this costs just under 900 Australian dollars in total. iScreen, on the other hand, just calculates your biological age without providing a report or explanation, and this in total is 195 Australian dollars. This provides a lot of different options for insurers and consumers, such as carrying out a test that provides a detailed report the first time, but just determining your biological age subsequently in order to save costs. Epigenetic tests often produce intricate and nuanced data requiring specialized knowledge to interpret accurately. The relationships between epigenetic markers and health outcomes are still being explored, and this complexity can make it difficult for insurers and underwriters to confidently predict an individual's health risk solely based on epigenetic data. In order for epigenetic tests to be implemented in life insurance, underwriters will need to be upskilled to interpret epigenetic tests more accurately. So, in summary, the use of epigenetics in life insurance can have the following benefits. It can slow or reverse biological age, and studies have shown that this can happen with an intervention as short as 8 weeks. It can turn public relations of insurance companies around by helping policyholders to live longer. Instead of just paying premiums and receiving benefits when you die or claim health benefits, the insurer wants the policyholder to actually live longer and benefit them while they are still living. Life insurance can predict more reliably how long someone is going to live and can therefore price more accurately. And it can also be used for underwriting in an upside manner, saying we'll underwrite it as we have always done, but if you are willing to give us a saliva sample, we might be able to reduce the premium by 50% so that they aren't worse off by offering the same terms to the same people, but also give those people that are going to live longer lower premiums, which helps competitiveness and helps their business because they have a healthier book of business. And insurers can also cut down on fraud. For example, smokers trying to come off as non-smokers. Insurance companies typically analyze your blood using creatinine tests to look for creatinine that only stays in your blood for about 16 hours. So after 16 hours, you look like a non-smoker, but not with epigenetics. Smoking affects your epigenome in a long-term way. So in conclusion, while implementing epigenetics in insurance poses significant benefits in terms of underwriting, pricing, policy management, and incentivizing policyholders to live healthy, there are still some concerns as well as ethical, legal, and social implications that need to be considered before it can be implemented. For those that are interested in epigenetics, you can read Epigenetics, a white paper on technology and innovation by the Society of Actuaries, or watch a presentation by Dr. Daniel D. Zimmerman called Be Kind to Your Genes, an insurance perspective on the fast-growing field of epigenetics. So epigenetics is not the answer, but something that can be used in addition to the current information we have available for risk management. So let us embrace the hidden key of epigenetics, unlocking a future where health and insurance risk assessment are truly personalized and where individuals have the power to shape their own genetic destiny.
Thank you, Christelle.
So,
I see we've run over time here. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, Julia.
Probably one.
Okay.
So please join me in thanking Poonam and Christelle for that interesting conversation. Dialing in from, 6 a.m. South Africa time for both of you, so well done. And I'm a bit nervous that maybe my tobacco consumption in the 90s is still there in my epigenetics. But I also had, like Naomi's friend, I had 3 kids at 23, so no doubt that's had an effect as well. So in terms of questions, if you'd like to send your questions through, I can't see any through on the iPad just yet, but I have one question to ask while we're waiting for anything else to come through. Mm-hmm. If epigenetics can have so many benefits, why hasn't it been implemented in life insurance yet?
So the main reason is the cost at the moment. The cost of doing these epigenetic tests are prohibitively expensive, and the need to interpret the results in a way that gives a policyholder and applicant very actionable information is also a big constraint, like Christelle mentioned. So, like we mentioned at the beginning, this is an emerging science, and as the tests are around for a lot longer, we know with technology things do get cheaper the longer they're around. So, at some point in the future, I believe they will become cheaply and very readily accessible and available. And I think at that point it would make sense for insurers to actually implement.
Thanks, Poonam.
And sorry, Poonam, just to add to that, the epigenetic tests also aren't carried out in Australia yet, so it's still shipped from the US to Australia and back, which also just adds to the additional costs of the test. So if the tests are actually carried out in Australia too, that will also help to reduce some of the cost of the epigenetic test.
Thanks, Christelle. If you have more questions about epigenetics for Poonam and Christelle, their email address is at the back of the presentation, and so you can send them your questions through and they can answer them and have a conversation with you that way. Thanks everyone for coming along to this session, and I think now it's time for afternoon tea.